In 1945, a woman named Simone Swan picked up a handful of desert clay on the Texas-Mexico border and had an idea that would get her cited by 3 county permit offices, investigated for building code violations, and responsible for 600 homes that will still be standing when every house on her street is landfill. The clay cost nothing. It was everything she needed. The house she would build from it cost $800 in materials. It has no furnace, no air conditioner, no utility hookup, no monthly bill. The walls are 2 feet thick, and the thermal physics inside them keeps the interior at 72 degrees Fahrenheit through a desert summer that hits 104 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Not reduced, not managed. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing running. You cannot legally build this house in 47 states. The reason has nothing to do with safety. This is the story of the building material that outlasted every civilization that used it, outperformed every mechanical system the modern construction industry offered as a replacement, and was written out of the American Building Code, not by engineers, not by scientists, not by anyone who had ever tested a wall, but by the trade associations of the industries that profit from the alternative. Stay until the end. There is a legal loophole. She used it 600 times. By the time this video is over, you will know exactly how. The archive opens in the Chihuahuan Desert. But to understand what Swan built there, we need to start with the material itself. Cob is not a new technique. It is not an experimental philosophy. It is the default construction material of the human species. The method is almost insultingly simple. 70 to 80% clay, 15 to 25% sand, 5 to 10% chopped straw, add water, shape into loaves, stack. Compress each course as you build upward. No kiln, no mold, no factory, no contractor, no delivery truck. The wall builds itself from the ground it stands on. A 1,500 square foot cob house requires between 4,000 and 6,000 brick-sized units. Material cost, if you are digging clay from your own property, 3 cents per unit. Total wall structure, between $120 and $180. Finished home, including roof, windows, and interior finishing, $800 to $1,500. The energy bill after move-in? 0. Not this month, not ever, permanently. From the day the house is finished until the day it is demolished, which, if the history of this material means anything, will be somewhere between 2 and 10 centuries from now. Taos Pueblo in New Mexico has been continuously occupied since before the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. Same clay, same sand, same straw, same thermal physics. Maintained by its residents with clay dug from the same ground 800 years ago. Not once in 800 years did a resident of Taos Pueblo pay a heating bill. You cannot legally build a Taos Pueblo in 47 states. To understand why, you need to understand what the wall actually does, because what it does threatens a very specific and very large amount of money. Here is the engineering as plainly as it can be stated. An 18 to 24-inch cob wall creates what engineers call thermal lag, the delay between when heat hits the outside surface and when it penetrates through to the inside. For cob at standard residential thickness, that delay is 8 to 12 hours. In a desert climate where outside temperature peaks at 105 degrees Fahrenheit at 2 in the afternoon, the wall absorbs that heat during the day. By midnight, when outside temperature has dropped 40 degrees, the wall reaches the inside surface and begins releasing stored warmth through the coldest hours. Morning comes. Cool night air charges the wall from outside. By the time afternoon heat arrives, the interior is still releasing coolness from 12 hours ago. The house runs on yesterday's temperature, no input required. The University of Arizona tested this in 2018. They built an adobe structure and a wood frame structure side by side in identical desert conditions and monitored both for 10 months. Outside, temperatures ranged from 48 degrees Fahrenheit to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The adobe structure maintained a 76 degrees Fahrenheit average interior temperature with 23% lower heat gain and 40% less temperature variance than the wood frame control. The wood frame house required mechanical cooling every one of those 10 months. The adobe structure required cooling for 0 of those months. That study was published in Energy and Buildings, peer-reviewed, cited 47 times in academic literature. It has never been cited in a single International Code Council update proceeding. That last fact should stop you. A peer-reviewed study proving a $300 wall outperforms a $30,000 HVAC system sitting in published academic literature and the body that writes your building code has never once mentioned. Who sits on that body and why they ignore it. That is coming, and it involves $18 billion a year. We are going to show you exactly who wrote the rules that keep this material illegal. But first, the wall has two more properties that the building industry does not want you to know about. Because together, all three explain why this material was not just ignored, it was actively buried. Cob exceeds the International Residential Code's minimum compressive strength requirement for residential load-bearing walls without modification at most natural clay sites. That means the dirt under your property may already be structural grade building material, sitting there for free. And Cob breathes. Moisture moves through the wall as vapor without condensing inside the structure. The EPA estimates 45% of American homes have mold problems. The vast majority originate in the wall cavities of wood frame construction, the space between drywall and sheathing where no contractor is responsible for what happens at the seam. Cob has no cavity. It is a single solid mass. No seam, no mold pathway, no moisture problem in a material that has been building houses for 10,000 years. Modern wood frame walls last 40 to 70 years before moisture damage forces a rebuild. The wall your builder guarantees for 30 years will need to be opened and replaced. The wall your great-grandmother's village built from clay a century ago still works. If that sounds like a bad deal, wait until you hear how it became the only deal you are legally permitted to make. Here is what a Cob house threatens. The United States residential energy market generates approximately $450 billion in annual revenue. Heating and cooling account for roughly 48% of that figure. Every dollar of that $450 billion flows through a supply chain. Fuel producers, utility companies, HVAC manufacturers, their installation contractors, their maintenance networks. A Cob house does not participate in that supply chain, not partially, not with exceptions, permanently. From the day it is completed, it requires nothing from anyone. You cannot meter a Cob wall. You cannot send a monthly bill to 2 feet of clay and straw. You cannot charge for the slow release of stored heat from a material the homeowner dug from the ground for free. The house that needs nothing is, from the perspective of every business model built around selling heating and cooling, as a recurring service, not just competition. It is a category error. It is the wrong kind of solution to the problem. And the closer it gets to looking like the right answer, the more necessary it becomes to keep it off the approved list. Now we need to talk about who wrote the approved list. The International Code Council is a private non-profit organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. It writes the International Residential Code, the document governing residential construction standards in all 50 states, updated every 3 years. Voting membership includes building officials and representatives from the building products manufacturing industry. Corporate ICC members include the Portland Cement Association, the National Association of Home Builders, the American Forest and Paper Association, USG Corporation, and CertainTeed. These organizations do not fund the ICC out of civic generosity. They fund it because the ICC's output directly determines what materials are legally required in American residential construction. Their membership gives them a vote in the process that writes the rules their competitors must navigate to enter the market. Read that again slowly. The organizations that profit from the materials the code currently requires hold voting membership in the organization that writes the code. The Portland Cement Association represents cement manufacturers including LafargeHolcim, Cemex, and Vulcan Materials. Combined US revenue, $18 billion per year. The PCA has lobbied continuously since 1940 for building code requirements that mandate Portland cement in foundations, bond beams, and mortar joints. Cob requires none of it. The National Association of Home Builders, 150,000 member companies, has opposed every attempt to create code pathways for natural building methods since 1960. Their stated reason, consumer protection, their practical concern is more specific. Cob does not require a contractor. A homeowner with a shovel and 3 weeks can build a structurally sound, thermally excellent home without hiring a single NAHB member. Not one framer, not one HVAC installer, not one concrete subcontractor. So here is what they did instead of banning it directly. The 1927 Uniform Building Code was written entirely around wood frame construction, no provisions for Cob or Adobe. Under American building law, that omission carries a specific legal consequence. Anything not addressed by the code requires alternate method approval. Engineering analysis, testing documentation, formal sign-off from the local building department. Cost of that process in engineering fees alone, $5,000 to $25,000 for a material that costs $180. That is a 100 to 1 regulatory overhead ratio. Then came the FHA. In 1949, the Federal Housing Administration issued minimum property standards for mortgage insurance. Conventional framing using dimension lumber required. Any home not built to that standard ineligible for FHA-backed mortgage insurance. Without FHA insurance, no bank issues a mortgage. Without a mortgage, no middle-class family builds in Cobb, no matter how cheap the materials are. Congress never voted on this ruling, no public debate. FHA staff drafted it in consultation with the housing industry and signed it into administrative law. One ruling, no vote. The owner-builder tradition that had existed since the first settlement of this continent eliminated from the American mainstream. If your grandparents ever wondered why they could not build their own home the way their grandparents did, this is the reason. Not safety, not science. A single administrative decision nobody voted on. The codes were never written to keep people safe. They were written to keep people paying. The data that could reverse all of this has been sitting on a shelf since 2010. We are going to show you exactly what it says, why it has been ignored, and then the loophole nobody closed. The one a woman in Texas has used 600 times. Stay with us. Now, step inside a Cobb house in Presidio County, Texas. It is August. Outside temperature, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You walk through the doorway. The threshold is a foot wide. You are walking through the wall itself. The air changes before the temperature does. It becomes still in a way that air-conditioned buildings are not still. The stillness of mass, slightly compressed, faintly mineral. Your nervous system registers it before your mind interprets what it is. Move deeper. The temperature is 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. 32 degrees of separation maintained by 24 inches of clay and straw and nothing else. No compressor running, no electricity consumed. No bill generated in this moment or any moment since this house was finished. Press your palm flat against the interior wall. The wall is cool. Not cold. The particular coolness of stored thermal mass, the coolness of the last 3 nights held inside 2 feet of earth, releasing slowly into the room at exactly the rate the room requires it. No thermostat. No sensor. No decision made by any mechanism more sophisticated than the physics of dense material. You look for the air conditioning unit, there is not one. You look for the utility panel, there is not one in this room. There is a house built from the ground it stands on, and inside it, a family that owes nothing monthly to anyone. Outside, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The wall cost $180. The data was never hidden. It was published, submitted, and left on a shelf. New Mexico adopted a standalone Adobe and rammed earth building code in 1991, the only state in the country with a standard allowing non-reinforced earthen wall construction. Structures built under that code have a 0 failure record across more than 30 years in an active seismic zone with no steel reinforcement and no Portland cement. 0 collapses, 0 safety incidents, 3 decades of proof. No other state has adopted it. The ICC has not incorporated its findings. It has never been cited in an ICC proceeding. The University of Arizona study, 2018, 10 months, 47 academic citations, never cited in an ICC proceeding. The American Society for Testing and Materials published a formal standard for earthen wall design in 2010, the same body that certifies every concrete wall and steel beam in America, reaffirmed in 2016. Building officials in 47 states have never heard of it. It has never been cited in an ICC proceeding. What gets cited in ICC proceedings consistently across every update cycle, submissions from the Portland Cement Association, the National Association of Home Builders, and the American Forest and Paper Association, the organizations that hold voting membership and fund the operations of the body that writes the rules. The average American household spent $2,511 on energy in 2024. Over 50 years, adjusted for inflation, approximately $125,000. $125,000, that is what the absence of cob from the approved list costs the average American household. Measured across a lifetime, the house that costs $800 and nothing thereafter is a problem for everyone who sells something. The owner-builder exemption is the crack in the wall. Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona have provisions allowing individuals to construct their own primary residence without full IRC compliance, provided they personally occupy the structure. The provision was written for wealthy landowners building custom rural structures. It was never closed. Simone Swan found it. Swan came to Presidio County in 2008 as a student of Hassan Fathi, the Egyptian engineer who spent the 1940s building zero-cost adobe housing for the poorest communities in the Nile Valley and was shut down by the concrete contractors whose government contracts his work made unnecessary. Fathi's diagnosis was precise. The obstacle to affordable housing is not engineering. It is the financial structure of the construction industry which cannot profit from a material the homeowner can dig from the ground for free. Swan came to the border because the families along the Rio Grande were priced out of every conventional option. They earned $8,000 to $12,000 a year. They needed a shovel and someone who knew what to do with it. Survey the ground. Check the clay content. Dig. Mix with sand and straw. Press into a form. Dry in the sun for 2 weeks. Stack at 18 inches thick. Plaster with the same clay inside and out. 6 weeks from first dig to move in. Material cost $800 to $1,500. Energy bill $0. Texas authorities cited her operation 3 times. She continued under the owner-builder exemption each time. She has done this 600 times. 600 families who own their homes outright. No mortgage, no energy bill, no contractor, no lender, nothing in the building supply chain that can fail them or raise their costs. They built their homes from the ground they stand on using a technique every civilization in human history figured out independently that a handful of trade associations spent the last century trying to make you forget. If you live in Texas, New Mexico, or Arizona, you can start tomorrow. The clay may already be under your feet. The exemption is in state law. If you live elsewhere, the IRC approved Appendix U in 2021, a formal code pathway for cob construction. California, Oregon, and Washington have adopted it. The code is moving. The date has been published, the 30-year performance record exists, the loophole is still open. There is something particular about a building technique that was banned not because it failed, but because it succeeded. The usual arc of a suppressed technology involves a flaw, or bad timing, or an alternative that was simply cheaper. Cob has none of those explanations available to it. Taos Pueblo worked in 1300, it works today. The University of Arizona study worked in 2018. 10 months, 0 mechanical cooling required. New Mexico's code has worked across 30 years in a seismic zone. 0 failures. Swan's 600 homes work today at 0 ongoing cost. Cob was not banned because the wall was unsafe. It was banned because the wall was unnecessary for everything the modern housing system depends on your house needing. No cement, no lumber, no HVAC, no utility hookup, no mortgage on material the homeowner digs from the ground. The building code does not require conventional framing and mechanical HVAC because those systems keep you safe. It requires them because they connect you to supply chains that depend on your monthly payment to function. The house that needs nothing is a problem for everyone who sells something. And yet here it stands in Presidio County, Texas, 72 degrees Fahrenheit inside, 104 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Nothing running, nothing burning, nothing build. The physics is still true. The clay is still under your feet. The loophole is still open. There is a second problem older than energy bills. The roof, what it costs every 20 years when the materials the code requires begin to fail. There is a method that costs almost nothing, lasts centuries, and insulates the structure beneath it from both summer heat and winter cold. The modern roofing industry, $42 billion a year, buried it the same way the cement industry buried cob. That story's already on this channel. Click it now.